Hello, happy Wednesday, friends. This is Cassie. Welcome back to my YouTube channel. Today I am over on the Brutus Monroe blog, and I'm going to be making a card for you, obviously. And I'm going to be using this really cool die of the month called Extravagant Egg. I love it. It takes up the full front of an A2 size card. And I'm also going to be using this adorable stamp of the month for February. Isn't that little bunny so cute? So yeah, and I'm also going to be using all these papers that you see here. Those came from the most recent Brutus Monroe inspiration box. And so I had some leftovers. I know I said I was going to hoard it, but I just had this idea in my head and I couldn't resist. So I have some sidewalk cardstock by Brutus Monroe. I'm going to tape that down to my die because I don't want this to shift in the die machine, because sometimes that happens with our dies, sometimes they shift. So I'm just going to tape that down, and then we're going to get this really cool cutout. And I do run it through a couple times. This sidewalk cardstock is like a 100-pound cardstock, and so running it through a couple times, I didn't need a metal shim. You might have to check your machine. Your machine might be a little bit different. And I'm going to try and get all those pieces out. You could do it just by hand, but that's a pain, so I'm going to use this little roller I have. I was looking at the papers and I was actually trying to be lazy, trying to figure out the easiest way to attach these papers without having to go too crazy, and I figured the easiest way was just to run each of those colors through my die cutting machine and paper piece it. And I'm going to do this with some 2-inch score tape on the back of my sidewalk cardstock that I use the die on. So that what you see there is the sticky side of the tape exposed. And so it's perfect because I'm going to take each of those pieces. And it's actually, I know it sounds daunting, but it's so much easier than you'd think. And now that I've got that one piece, the big piece put in, I'm going to take my crystal katana, or you could take a paper piercer, and I'm just going to push the pieces that I want from that color into the page. And if you get pieces where you don't want it, it's pretty easy to just kind of use your paper piercer or your crystal katana or whatever and take those pieces out. And then I'm going to put this same dark pink color down at the bottom. And I'll do the exact same thing. So you just want to lay it over the top, and then you can easily push the pieces that you want from the die into your piece, which is great. And you may have some pieces that don't come through, that end up sticking to the plate, but that's an easy fix too. So you just pick it up and, put it in, no big deal. And I'm going to save each of these pieces that I end up using, the leftovers. So I'll have obviously lots of the orange left over, and I could use this whole orange panel on a whole nother card. All right, because all I used were the flowers from this one, and I'm picking out the pieces I don't want. And then we'll do it with the green as well. And we're obviously going in rainbow order, right? We had to go in rainbow order. So this is what I'm talking about. And it was easiest to just use my crystal katana to pick up those pieces that I needed. And then I can put each of those pieces just inside where they go. And then I can lay my die cut piece right over the top. And then, once again, push all those pieces in that I need pushed in. And it was, this was actually so super easy. I was FaceTiming my mom the whole time I was doing it. No big deal. And then I didn't want any of the pieces to be in the dots all around, although you could very easily try and rainbow that as well. I just wanted those to be plain because I have a plan for those later. And then we have all of our green in there, and I'm loving how this is looking. And now we'll grab our blue, and we're going to do obviously the exact same thing with that once again. We'll stick all those pieces in. And here's where I end up when I'm putting the pieces down. They aren't entirely centered. And I thought it was going to be a much bigger deal than it actually ended up being, because looking at the screen, I can't really tell. But if you're really close up, you can kind of tell they're a little bit off. But it ends up not being a big deal because as I look at this card, I think it looks just fine. And the recipient's not going to look that close either, let's be real. Because I actually made this card with my sweet little niece in mind. She has an April birthday, and I thought this little egg, and I'm pairing it up with that adorable bunny, would be just the perfect card for her. And so, this is going to be a birthday card for my sweet little niece. All right, and then we're finally going to move on to the purple. Same process with this one. We're going to fill in those last gaps with our purple. And I love how this turned out. It turned out so much better in person than it did in my head. And I'm happy I didn't hoard the paper like I originally wanted to. But like I said, now I have all these pieces, all these panels that have the egg cut out of them that I can now use to make cards as well. And you know, you can do all kinds of things. You could fill this in with, just back it with something. You could use some glitter stock if you wanted to. I'm actually, with that leftover, all those circles all around the egg, I am using some Arteza glitter. This is the Neon Lime. I like this glitter because the pot has a little shaker top, and it also has like a spot where you could pour. So I'm just kind of burnishing that into the center, or into those circles, and then I'll dump off the excess and put that back into my little container. So yeah, I think this turned out so cool. And I do like the sidewalk cardstock, but I do decide I want to trim this down just a little bit because, like I said, that whole cutout will be the entire front of an A2 size card. So I'm just trimming this off so it'll be a little less than 4 inches, but I do keep the same 5.5 inches. And here I'll cut 1 inch of the purple, and then I'm going to take some glue and I'll glue down just that purple panel to my card base, which is some more of that sidewalk cardstock. And then I'll peel off the backing paper from my 2-inch Scor tape. And then I'm going to ever so carefully put this down to my card front. And I love it with that little pop of purple. It makes the purple in the center stand out a little bit more. I'm going to put this into my MISTI, and I'm going to grab out my little bunny because, of course, now I have to decorate the insides. The only time it seems like I don't is when I'm making like 5 cards, 1 kit. I don't always show that. But I do love to have the insides decorated. So I inked this up with some Distress Oxide in the color Picked Raspberry. And then I'm going to ink up the sentiment using some Memento Tuxedo black ink. You could use just about any color. And then I'll clean up my mess and we'll get ready to stamp our tiny little bunny. Inking that up with some Memento Tuxedo black ink and stamping that down onto some Express It cardstock because I plan to do some Copic coloring. And this is super easy, super simple Copic coloring. I'm only using a couple colors. That's RV25, and then I'm going to use my darker shade of RV66. Then for his ear, or her little ears and her nose, RV11. And then for the bunny itself, I'm using T3. And typically I don't put down my darker color first, but in this case, because it's just a small amount, it wasn't a big deal. And I'll come in with some T1. And then blend all that out. And then to blend it even more, I'm going to grab my Copic colorless blender just to blend that out even a little bit more. And then we'll be ready to fussy cut her out. So she was super simple. And because she is an easy image to fussy cut, I don't mind fussy cutting her. Of course, I don't really mind fussy cutting anyway. I know some of you really don't like it, but I find it to be a little bit of a stress reliever, so I can sit and fussy cut all day and it really doesn't bother me. And then she's ready to go. And now I'm going to stamp out the sentiment. I didn't have any green in my stash, surprisingly, that would match the green that I had for my paper. But I didn't want to use that paper because it had a pattern to it. So I just used my Copic in the color G07. I'm going to heat that till that is dry because I plan to do some embossing on it. And when you put down alcohol marker, it definitely stays wet for a bit. And I'm going to pull out my magic powder bag and then the sentiments I plan to use. And then some embossing ink by Brutus Monroe, and I'll ink up the word that says smile, and then I'm going to ink up the other sentiment that says some bunny loves you, and I'll stamp that down as well. Cover that with some Alabaster embossing powder. I do end up getting a little smudge in between the L and the E, but I'll just take a tiny paintbrush. This is just a paintbrush from Arteza. And then I will get that out of there, and then we'll heat this. It's funny when you look at your sentiments sometimes and you've stamped them and you've put embossing powder on them, sometimes they look like they're not going to turn out, and then you heat them and you're like, oh, what was I worried about? It looks perfect. I'm going to cover the back of my little bunny along with the sentiments with some foam tape because I want those to be popped up on the front. And I'll use my paper piercer to take all the release paper off. I'll put my little bunny down and then decide where I want my sentiments. At first I thought about keeping that sentiment fairly straight, but I do decide to make it a little bit wonky. So I'll peel off all the release paper on the back of that one and then stick it sort of behind her, and then it's going to be just a little bit wonky. And then I'll do the same thing with smile. So it's going to go behind her as well and just be a little bit off. And then that's actually going to finish off our card. I love how this turned out. So like I said, I'm over on the Brutus Monroe blog, so I'll have that linked down below if you'd like to go check that out. If you liked this video, please hit the like button and subscribe if you haven't already done so. And as always, thanks for everything you guys do, all the love and support, and thank you for stopping by.